Hello, welcome to week 3 of Start Your Novel with Jessica Rinn, me. And I really hope you enjoyed your first 2 weeks of the course. I hope you enjoyed meeting your characters and creating your plot. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube and perhaps don't know about the course, you can sign up. It's completely free. All you need to do is go to ferventinc.com/startyournovel. This week, week 3, we are going to be building our story worlds. Story world building is something that's talked about a lot amongst authors that write sci-fi, fantasy or speculative fiction, but it's actually really important regardless of your genre. It's really important because you want to create a realistic setting that feels like a real place for your reader. You also want it to feel real for you as you're writing it. If you really understand the surroundings that your characters are in and that the story that your book takes place in, you kind of need to know where things are. You want to write it really authentically as if you're there yourself, and you want to also know what their limitations are. So you need to know that there's places that they'll be able to get to easily or places that would be more difficult for them to get to. It's all logistics, and it might sound boring, but it's actually all really important when you're trying to make your story feel really real and really authentic. We're going to think about the really big things to start with. We're going to think about what the area is like. We're going to decide whether it's a town, a village or a city, because that will also really affect the population and the people around your character. We're going to think about what the scenery looks like. We're going to think about whether there's parts of the town that are different to other parts of the town. Is there sort of a richer, more swanky part of the town and a part of the town that's maybe a bit more deprived, and you can show a little bit of the difference between them. We're also going to talk about the slightly smaller things that are just as important, things like your character's home, how close their house is to other houses, how far away their shop is, their nearest shop, and things like what their actual rooms in their home look like. Which room do they spend the most time in? All the kind of things like that. We're also going to have a think about not just what the place looks like and not just what's there, but also the whole backdrop. So we're going to think about climate, we're going to think about temperature and weather, because you can really use that to your advantage. Weather is something amazing you can use to create mood and atmosphere. You don't even have to go with what's most obvious. So a lot of thrillers and horrors tend to have sort of lots of storms, lots of dark, rainy weather, which completely makes sense because a lot of people find that sort of weather a little bit spooky. But sometimes it's quite even more frightening to turn that on its head and perhaps use the weather in the opposite way than you might think. We're going to explore that a little bit in the workbooks as well. Time period is another thing that we're going to consider. When is your story set? Is it historical? Is it set in the present day? And how can we show our readers exactly whereabouts we are time-wise without just telling them? Because that, let's face it, that's a little bit boring. So we need to think about things like fashion, what's people wearing, pop culture, what music is fashionable at the time, what big world events could signify to your reader immediately, oh, I know exactly when that time period is. It also all goes towards making a really, really great atmosphere as well for your novel. Another thing we're going to think about is the rules of your story world. Every single story world needs its own rules. Now, this is mostly spoken about when it comes to sci-fi, fantasy fiction, or anything otherworldly, because it's really important to make that as believable as they can. This week we're also going to be thinking about the rules of your story world. So every single story world needs its own specific rules. Now, rules are often spoken about when people are writing sci-fi, fantasy, fiction, or anything otherworldly. And this is because it's especially important to help the reader to suspend their disbelief and believe in exactly what they're reading. So, for instance, in the Narnia books, when Lucy comes back from Narnia, she comes through the wardrobe and no time has passed since she's gone, even though she's had time to go for a nice walk in the woods and have tea with a fawn. She's still comes back to the exact point in time. Obviously, in real life, most of us probably not believe that. But because the writer has explained that that's the rule and explained that that's how that works in the story world and kept that consistent throughout each book of that series, when we read it, we're quite happy to accept that and just think, okay, that's the rule of that story world. This is also still important though when you're writing real world kind of books. The reader still knows they're reading a story, and you want them to forget that. You want them to feel like they're actually part of it. So to do that, you have to create a world that feels really authentic. We can do this by having really consistent characters. That doesn't mean they can't change throughout it, but we need to see why they're changing and how they're changing. It doesn't mean they can't have fluctuations in mood and nuance, because we need all that as well, but it still needs to be written within a consistent frame. We also need the societal rules around them to be consistent. So not necessarily like the law of the land, although that's important as well, but things like the economy, what's happening around your characters politically, what current events might be impacting some of your characters, maybe even your main character. Have a think about what's happening culturally as well. Perhaps your town or your village or your city has urban legends that might play nicely into your story. There might be kind of local tragedies and things that play into how people are feeling when they find out about something that might happen. Also, I think nearly every town or nearly every village especially has that one family that get blamed for everything, perhaps because of something they've done or a reputation. So that can be something really nice to think about as well. The history of an area will have a really, really important bearing on how characters act today. So that's also another really good thing to bear in mind. When it comes to your setting, when you're trying to describe your setting, just like with your characters, you don't want to just list them. You don't want to just say, oh, the sea was blue, the I don't know, the bricks were red, or it was cold. You want to be able to say it in a really interesting way that evokes some feeling from your reader. So the best way to do this is often to have your character interact somehow with their setting, because that also brings your character back to life as well. You want to be able to use all of those things. Use your setting to convey mood, to convey the atmosphere. Don't just have it be completely flat. And also, when you're using your setting, use the objects around you to trigger memories, to make the character think of something, feel something, and use all of your senses when you're doing this as well. When you're describing setting, describe what the character can feel, taste, smell, hear, and see. Obviously, you want to use all of your senses as well when you're describing your setting. So use your taste, your smell, sight. What can you hear? Think about all of those things. Use the objects around your characters as well. You can use them to evoke memories. And actually, the most powerful sense when you're trying to trigger a memory is actually the sense of smell. So exploit that to your advantage as well. I really hope that you enjoy all the exercises this week. I think they're really fun. They're all ones that I've done myself. Really enjoy building your world as well, because it's really exciting. That's where you're going to be spending the whole of your time while you write this novel. So make it somewhere interesting. Make it somewhere where you really want to be spending time. When you've done it, or while you're doing it, hop onto the website group, to the Facebook group, sorry, and say hi to everyone else who's doing the course, see how they're all getting on, and share ideas. And I look forward to seeing you next week when we will be writing our first chapters, which is really exciting. Have a good day. Bye.